The empty scale throne had refused kings for 70 years. It sat at the heart of the Black Hall, carved from the shed scales of the first dragon sovereign, taller than any man and darker than burned iron. No crown rested on it. No ruler sat upon it. The throne had remained empty through 3 coronations, 2 wars, and 1 bloodline's rise to power. The royal court called it a sacred relic. The servants called it a warning. Tonight, they dragged a servant girl before it to prove she had no blood worth remembering. Neressa Vale stumbled across the black stone floor with dragonbone shackles around her wrists. Her knees were bruised from the hatchery stairs. Her plain brown servant dress had been torn at the hem, and soot streaked one side of her face where a guard had shoved her against the ash wall. Around her, the dragon court watched from crescent balconies carved into the ribs of the hall, their jewels catching firelight, their whispers moving like knives. She was not accused of theft. That would have been kinder. She was accused of pretending to have royal blood. In Draventhorn, there were few crimes more insulting to the throne. She was found touching the scale reliquary, Lord Vaelric announced. He stood beside the empty throne in a robe of black velvet, clasped with a dragon eye ruby. His hair was white, his face fine-boned and cold, his expression grave enough to fool anyone who did not know how much cruelty could hide behind ceremony. Neressa kept her head bowed, not because she was ashamed, because the oath on her wrist burned whenever she looked too long at a noble. The mark had been carved into her when she was 7, after her mother died in the palace laundry and the debt passed to the child. A servant oath was supposed to ensure obedience. In Neressa, it had become a second pulse. Refuse an order, and it burned. Speak above your station, and it burned. Touch what belonged to the royal bloodline, and it burned like a coal pressed into bone. Tonight, it had not burned when she touched the reliquary. That was why they were afraid. The scale reliquary answers only royal blood. Lord Vaelric continued. When this girl placed her hand upon it, the western wing of the hatchery went dark. 3 servants saw her. 2 guards restrained her. The relic itself trembled. A ripple of disgust moved through the court. A servant's trick, blood theft, old magic. Neressa said nothing. Her silence was not weakness. It was survival, measured in breaths. On the high dais beyond the throne stood King Azrien Kael, Dragon King of Draventhorn, crowned but not seated. No ruler could sit on the empty scale throne. Not his father, not his grandfather, not Azrien himself, though the court never spoke of that humiliation aloud. He was young for a king, but power had hardened him early, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black scale armor with a crimson cloak falling from one shoulder. He watched the trial with eyes like molten bronze under a storm. His jaw was sharp, his face beautiful in the dangerous way of a blade left in candlelight. Nobles feared his temper. Armies feared his name. Servants feared his silence. But Neressa had seen him once when no one else was looking. 3 winters ago, in the abandoned North Aviary, he had stood before the caged bones of a dead dragon and rested his forehead against the bars. Not like a king, like a boy grieving something he had never been allowed to love. Since then, she had feared him differently. Lord Vaelric lifted one hand, and the guards forced Neressa closer to the throne. The empty scale throne did not shine. It swallowed light. Its back rose in overlapping black scales, each one etched with names so old they had become almost unreadable. Its armrests curved like folded wings. Its seat remained bare, untouched by crown, cloak, or living body. Above it hung the royal banner of House Kael, a red dragon with its wings spread wide, but the throne itself had no wings carved into it. Neressa had noticed that. As a child, she noticed everything that was missing. "My king," Lord Vaelric said, turning toward Azrien. "The girl must kneel. If her blood is false, the throne will remain empty, and the court will know her crime. If she has used forbidden magic to mimic royal response, the scales will reject her. And if it kills her? Azrien asked. The court fell silent. Vaelric's smile did not move. Then the throne has protected itself. Neressa felt the oath mark tighten around her wrist. Azrien's gaze moved from Vaelric to her. Did you touch the reliquary? Her throat dried. Every servant in the hall knew the danger of answering a king. Every noble waited for the smallest tremor that could be shaped into guilt. Neressa lifted her shackled hands. Yes, your majesty. A murmur broke through the court. Lord Vaelric's eyes gleamed. Azrien stepped down one stair. Why? Neressa looked toward the black throne. She could still feel the reliquary under her palm. Cold at first, then warm, then trembling as if something inside it had recognized her skin. She had gone to clean ash from the lower shelves. Nothing more, but one loose scale had fallen from the reliquary and landed near her foot. When she picked it up, it had folded around her finger like a living thing. Then it whispered a name she had never heard. Not Neressa. Something older. Something that made the oath mark on her wrist go silent for the first time in her life. She could not tell the court that, so she answered with the smallest truth. It fell. Laughter rose instantly. It fell, a noble woman repeated, amused. And servants now catch royal relics out of kindness? Lord Vaelric turned to the court. You hear her. No reverence. No fear. She admits to touching what even noble blood approaches on its knees. Neressa's fingers curled. A small pain, familiar and cruel, burned through the oath mark. Do not speak. Do not defend. Do not become visible. Azrien descended another step. The movement silenced half the hall. What did the scale do? He asked. Neressa looked up, despite the burning. For one heartbeat, his bronze eyes held hers. Not gently, but carefully, as if he knew the answer mattered more than the accusation. Before she could speak, Lord Vaelric cut in. My king, delay invites contamination. The throne must judge before the relic's response spreads further. Azrien's eyes did not leave Neressa. I asked her. Lord Vaelric bowed. And I protect your crown. The words were smooth. The threat beneath them was not. Neressa saw it then, the invisible chain between council and king. Azrien wore the crown, but Lord Vaelric knew where it had been welded. If the throne wanted a liar, Neressa said quietly, it would have answered your king's. The black hall went silent. Not shocked silent, wounded silent, the kind of silence that followed a blade, entering exactly where armor had been thinnest. Lord Vaelric's face hardened. Make her kneel. A guard struck the back of Neressa's knees. She fell before the empty scale throne. Pain shot up her legs. The court leaned forward as one body, hungry for the relic to reject her, burn her, prove that no servant could rise above the floor where she had been thrown. Neressa pressed her bound hands to the black stone. She would not beg, not because she was brave, because begging had never saved anyone like her. Lord Vaelric's voice rang above her. Kneel, and be known. The oath mark around Neressa's wrist burned white. The empty scale throne remained still. A few nobles began to smile. Then, the lowest scale on the throne lifted. The sound was soft, almost delicate, like a blade being unsheathed by a sleeping hand. Neressa stopped breathing. Another scale lifted, then another. Across the throne's black surface, hundreds of scales rose one by one, no longer dead, no longer relic, but alive and turning toward her. The court's laughter died. Lord Vaelric stepped back. For the first time, Neressa realized he was not afraid the throne had been fooled. He was afraid it had remembered. Even King Azrien went still. The oath mark on Neressa's wrist split open without blood, not breaking, unlocking. Black scales spilled from the throne like a tide. They crossed the floor, climbed her shackles, and wrapped around her spine. Neressa arched as pain and heat tore through her back. She heard someone scream and realized distantly, that it was not her. She had no air left for screaming. The scales locked into her skin. Then they opened. Wings unfolded from her back, vast, black, living, veined with molten gold. The scar beneath Azrien's crown burned gold at the same moment her wings opened. The empty scale throne gave the servant girl what it had refused every king. And from the high dais, Dragon King Azrien reached toward her with horror in his eyes, as if the throne had not crowned a stranger, as if it had finally found the bloodline his family had buried. For one breath, the Black Hall forgot the meaning of rank. Nobles did not bow. Guards did not move. Lord Vaelric did not speak. Even the torches along the dragonbone pillars burned without flicker, as if flame itself had turned to watch the servant girl, kneeling before the empty scale throne, with living wings rising from her back. Neressa could not breathe. The wings were not weightless magic. They were bone, scale, heat, and pain. They pulled from her spine as if something long buried inside her had finally been given shape. Each movement sent fire through her ribs. The black scales at their base locked beneath her skin, no longer touching her like armor, but belonging to her like a second body she had never learned how to carry. She tried to move. The wings opened wider. A rush of air swept across the hall, knocking ash from the banners of House Kael. Someone screamed, "Abomination!" Another voice whispered, "Royal." That second word frightened the court more. Azrien stepped down from the dais, one hand pressed to the base of his crown. Gold light burned beneath the circlet, thin as a hidden blade. The scar there had opened, though no blood fell. He looked at Neressa, as if her wings had torn open something in him, too. Lord Vaelric recovered first. "Seize her." The order cracked through the hall. The guards hesitated. They had dragged Neressa forward easily enough, when she was only a servant in chains. Now the dragonbone shackles around her wrists had gone black and brittle, and the throne scales coiled around them like living serpents. No one wanted to be the first to touch what the empty scale throne had chosen. Vaelric turned cold eyes on the nearest captain. "I said." The captain moved. Azrien's voice stopped him. "No." The word was quiet. The hall heard it anyway. Vaelric's face tightened. "My king, whatever has attached itself to that girl is forbidden old magic. If she is allowed to stand, every house in Draventhorn will see your throne challenged by a kitchen servant." Azrien's gaze did not leave Neressa. "The throne challenged me before she entered this hall." Silence struck harder than shouting. For 70 years, the royal house had dressed its humiliation in ceremony. No king sat on the empty scale throne because it was too sacred. No crown touched it because it was too ancient. No one questioned why a throne made for dragon royalty had remained empty under every dragon king who claimed it. Azrien had just named the wound aloud. Neressa pushed one hand against the floor. Pain roared through her back as the wings shifted for balance. She nearly collapsed, but something inside the throne answered her struggle. A low hum rose beneath the stone. Not a song, not a voice, but recognition. The oath mark on her wrist burned again. Not from disobedience, from resistance. The mark tried to close where it had split, tried to rebind what the throne had unlocked. Neressa gasped, her fingers clawing at the floor. Azrien saw. "What is happening?" Lord Vaelric answered too quickly. "The false blood is rejecting the relic." "No," Neressa forced out. Her voice shook. The oath punished each word, but the throne steadied her spine. She lifted her wrist. The broken oath mark glowed red around the edges, fighting the black scale light now winding through her veins. "It is not the throne rejecting me," she said. "It is the oath." A murmur passed through the servants at the back of the hall. Every servant oath in Draventhorn was supposed to be harmless law. Binding, yes. Painful when broken, yes. But not blood magic. Not royal magic. Not strong enough to fight a throne. Azrien's face darkened. "Who carved it?" Neressa looked at Lord Vaelric. So did half the hall. Vaelric's expression remained composed, but the dragon eye ruby at his throat pulsed once. "My office oversees all palace oaths," he said, "for the safety of crown property." Crown property. The words landed on Neressa's skin colder than the shackles ever had. Azrien descended another step. "She is not property." Vaelric bowed his head. "That depends on whether she is servant, criminal, or rival claimant." The court stirred. Rival claimant. The phrase gave shape to what everyone feared. Neressa did not want a crown. She wanted heir. She wanted the burning in her back to stop. She wanted to be 7 again for one impossible moment before the oath knife touched her skin, before her mother became a debt, before every missing thing in her life was explained as servant fate. Then the throne behind her shifted. A scale rose near the left armrest and turned outward. On its underside, written in molten gold, was a name. Neressa could not read it from where she knelt, but Azrien could. His face went still. Vaelric saw it too, and moved before the king could speak. He struck the scale with his cane. The gold name vanished beneath a flash of black fire. Neressa screamed as pain tore through her left wing. Azrien was across the hall in an instant. He caught Vaelric's wrist before the council lord could strike again. The force of the king's grip cracked the jeweled cane. "What name did you erase?" Azrien asked. Vaelric's composure finally fractured. "Only for a heartbeat. Enough. The name of a dead traitor," he said. Neressa's wing trembled. The pain brought tears to her eyes, but through it, she saw something fall from the burned scale. A curl of gold ash. It drifted across the floor and touched her open palm. A memory struck, a woman's voice, low and urgent. "Do not let them make you kneel without knowing what rises with you." Neressa stopped breathing. Her mother, not in the laundry, not coughing through smoke, not dying in debt, standing before this throne with black wings spread behind her, blood on her mouth, and a baby wrapped against her chest. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. Neressa looked up at Azrien. He had seen enough on her face to understand that the throne had given her something. Vaelric did too. His eyes turned flat with decision. "She is not to leave this hall alive," he said. Azrien released him slowly. The scar beneath the king's crown burned brighter. "If anyone raises a blade against her," Azrien said, "they raise it against me." Neressa's heart lurched. For a moment, the court did not know which fear to obey. Then the empty scale throne spoke. Not in words, in wings. Every carved scale on its back opened at once, and the black stone beneath the dais split, revealing a staircase descending into darkness below the throne. From that darkness came the sound of chains dragging over bone, and a voice older than the royal house whispered, "The heir has knelt. Now let the thief answer." The voice beneath the throne did not echo. It rose through the bones of the black hall as if it had been waiting inside every stone. "The heir has knelt. Now let the thief answer." No one spoke. Even Lord Vaelric's face lost color, though he recovered quickly enough to hide most of it. The court looked from the open staircase beneath the empty scale throne to Neressa's black wings, then to King Azrien, whose hand still gripped the broken remains of Vaelric's cane. Azrien released the council lord. Slowly, "Who is beneath my throne?" he asked. Vaelric bowed, but the gesture had no grace now. "Old traps. Dead magic." The scale wing line was known for theatrical curses. Neressa pushed herself upright. The wings made the movement clumsy, painful, unfamiliar. One brushed the black floor and sent sparks crawling across the stone. The court stepped back as if her feathers were blades, though they were not feathers at all. They were living black scales, layered into the shape of wings, each vein glowing molten gold. Her oath mark burned again. "Knelt. Stay. Obey." The command moved through her wrist like a hot chain, but the throne's scales tightened along her spine in answer, not controlling her, holding her up. For the first time in her life, something powerful did not want her smaller, Azrien turned toward her. "Can you walk?" Neressa almost laughed. The question was absurd. She could barely breathe. She had wings grown from a throne that had just accused someone of theft. Half the court wanted her dead. The other half wanted to know whether bowing early might save them. But Azrien had asked as if her answer mattered. "I can fall forward," she said. A brief, startled flicker crossed his face. Not quite amusement. Not yet. But something human. "Then fall behind me." "No." The word came too quickly. The oath punished it at once. Neressa gasped and clutched her wrist. The red mark flared, trying to close over the split where the throne had unlocked it. Azrien stepped toward her, but she lifted her hand. "No," she repeated, voice shaking. "I have been behind people my whole life." The black hall heard her. The servants at the back heard her most. Azrien looked at her for one long breath, then stepped aside, not away from danger. "Beside it, then walk with me." Lord Vaelric's eyes narrowed. The old voice beneath the throne gave a sound that might have been approval, or might have been stone remembering how to laugh. Neressa took one step toward the staircase. Pain flashed through her back as the wings dragged against muscles that had never carried them. Azrien reached out, then stopped before touching her. She noticed. So did he. "May I?" he asked. It nearly undid her. Not the court. Not the wings. Not the old voice. That question. Neressa nodded once. Azrien placed one hand beneath the joint, where scale met shoulder blade. Heat passed between them. The scar under his crown burned brighter at the same moment. The gold veins in her wings flared. Both of them froze. A vision struck. Not full. Not clear. A throne room burning with white dragon fire. A woman with black scale wings standing before the empty scale throne, one hand on her heart, one hand raised against soldiers in House Kael armor. A man wearing Azrien's crown kneeling before her, not in love, but begging. Then Lord Vaelric, younger by decades, pressing a blade beneath the crown of a crying child. Azrien yerket back. Neressa stegel. "You saw it," she whispered. His face had gone hard, but not at her. "Yes." Vaelric moved suddenly toward the dais. "My king, step away from her. The relic is infecting your blood." Azrien turned on him. "What scar is beneath my crown?" The question tore through the hall. For years, the crown had never been removed in public. Royal custom, the court said. Dragon kings bore the circlet from dawn prayer to burial flame. No one asked what lay beneath it. Vaelric's mouth tightened. "A coronation mark," he said. Azrien reached up. The court inhaled as one. "No," Vaelric said sharply. That one word betrayed more than panic could have. Azrien removed the crown. Gold light spilled from beneath it. Across his forehead, hidden at the hairline, burned a jagged scar shaped like a broken wing. It was old, carved deep, and threaded with the same dark magic as Neressa's oath mark. The king stared at the crown in his hand. Neressa stared at the wound. The voice beneath the throne whispered again. Stolen king. Hidden heir. One crown. 2 cages. Vaelric's composure shattered. "Seal the stairs," he ordered. This time, the guards did not move. Vaelric turned furious. "Seal them." Azrien's voice was colder. "Any guard who obeys him dies as traitor to the throne." A line had been drawn. For a moment, the hall balanced on it. Then the captain of the guard lowered his sword toward Vaelric. "As the king commands." Vaelric smiled thinly. "Despite everything, you still think you are king because men obey you." The dragon eye ruby at his throat split open. Black smoke poured from it, racing across the floor toward the servants gathered in the shadows. Their oath marks flared red all at once. Cries broke through the hall as dozens of servants dropped to their knees, wrists burning. Neressa felt the command strike her too. "Bow. Bleed. Bind the air." Her wings snapped open. Not because she commanded them, because the throne did. The black scale light rushed from her spine across the floor, striking the servant's oath marks one by one. Red chains appeared in the air, all leading back to the ruby at Vaelric's throat. Neressa understood with sick clarity. The palace oaths had never been simple obedience spells. They were a net built to catch any surviving scalewing blood. Azrien saw it too. He lifted his crown like a weapon. But Neressa caught his wrist. "No," she said through the burning in her own mark. "If you strike him, the oaths will tear through them." Vaelric's smile widened. "Clever girl." The words crawled over her skin. Then the staircase beneath the throne breathed cold air into the hall. The old voice spoke one final command. "Bring the thief below." The red chains tightened. The servant screamed. Neressa looked at Azrien, then at the open darkness beneath the throne. Her wings trembled. "If the oaths are the net," she whispered, "then the knot is down there." Azrien put the crown back on, but it no longer hid the scar. Gold light bled beneath it, like a warning. "Then we cut the knot." Together, they stepped onto the first stair. Behind them, Lord Vaelric whispered something into the broken ruby, and every servant oath in the black hall began to bleed. The stairs beneath the empty scale throne were not carved for living feet. They were narrow, steep, and black as old blood, descending into a cold that had no place beneath a hall of fire. Neressa's wings scraped the walls with every step, their molten veins casting thin gold light over bones embedded in the stone. Not dragon bones, human ones. Finger bones, wrist bones. The small, delicate remains of people who had worn servant oaths and died with their hands reaching upward. Behind her, the black hall rang with screams. Every servant oath was bleeding. Neressa felt each one as a tug in her own wrist. Dozens of red threads stretched from the hall above, through the open stair, into the darkness below. Some were thin as hair. Some were thick with years of obedience. All of them pulled toward the same unseen heart, the knot. Azrien followed one step behind her, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough not to make that choice for her. The crown sat on his head again, but the broken wing scar beneath it burned through the metal in gold lines. "You are shaking," he said. Neressa gripped the wall. "So are you." A muscle moved in his jaw. He did not deny it. That made her trust him a little more than she wanted to. The stairs curved sharply, and the voice beneath the throne whispered through the walls. Blood made cages. Names made keys. Neressa stopped. "Do you hear it?" "Yes." "What is it?" Azrien looked into the dark below. "I was hoping you knew." A bitter laugh almost escaped her. It died when pain flashed through her wrist. Above them, someone screamed her name, not Neressa Vale, but Servant Girl, as if the court still believed pain could reduce her back into function. Her wings opened slightly, pressing against both walls. The red threads trembled. For one impossible moment, Neressa felt the lives attached to them. The scullery boy who had once slipped her bread when she was too tired to stand. The old seamstress with crooked fingers. The stable-maid who sang under her breath only when nobles were gone. The kitchen twins whose oaths had been carved on the same day. Every servant in the palace was tied to the knot beneath the stolen throne. If she failed, they would bleed for the bloodline she had never known she carried. Azrien saw the change in her face. "Tell me, they are not punishing only me," she said. "They are using them to hold me still." His eyes darkened. Vaelric always preferred hostages to soldiers. "Did you know?" The question came sharper than she meant it. Azrien accepted it without flinching. "No." "Did you ever ask?" That struck deeper. For several steps, there was only the sound of chains, dragging somewhere below. At last, he said, "Not enough." It was not an excuse. Neressa hated that too. She wanted him simple. Cruel king, false heir, Enemy wearing a stolen crown. It would have been easier to hate him if he defended himself. Instead, he walked behind her with a hidden scar burning under his crown and guilt gathering in the silence between them. They reached the bottom of the stair. A chamber opened before them, round and vast, built beneath the throne like the hollow underside of a crown. At its center hung a massive knot of red light, suspended over a black pit. Hundreds of oath threads fed into it from above, twisting around a pillar of bone. At the pillar's base sat an ancient iron chair. Someone was chained to it. Neressa's breath caught. The figure was a woman, or what remained of one. Her body was ash-thin, wrapped in strips of dark cloth, her head bowed beneath a fall of white hair. From her back extended 2 broken stumps, where wings had once been. Black scales covered the floor around her like fallen leaves. Azrien went still. "Who is that?" The woman lifted her head. Her eyes opened. "Molten Gold." Neressa's wings folded close to her back, as if bowing before the body could decide. The woman smiled faintly, and the expression hurt more than grief. "You have your mother's mouth," she whispered. Neressa could not move. Azrien stared at the chained woman. "Your mother died. That is what debts are for," the woman said. "They let murder become paperwork." Neressa's knees weakened. "My mother was Lord Vaelric," she whispered. "A laundry servant." "No," the woman said. "Your mother was Leora of the Scale Wing blood. Last crown daughter before House Kael learned to call conquest succession." Azrien flinched as if struck. The woman's gaze moved to him. "No hatred. That was worse. And you are the child they cut." His hand lifted to the scar beneath his crown. "What did they do to me?" he asked. Before the woman could answer, Lord Vaelric's voice flowed down the stairs behind them. "What we had to." Neressa turned. Vaelric stood at the chamber entrance with 6 black-armored oath guards behind him. The broken dragon-eye ruby at his throat bled smoke into the red threads. He looked at the chained woman, then at Neressa's wings. "So much trouble," he murmured, "for a bloodline that should have stayed buried." Azrien stepped forward. "Release the servants," Vaelric smiled. "You still bargain as if the throne is yours." The red knot pulsed. Above them, the servants screamed again. Neressa's mother strained against her chains. "Do not fight him with crown. Fire. That feeds the knot." Azrien's hand froze at his sword. Vaelric's smile widened. "Listen to the broken queen, your majesty. She has had 70 years to learn what hurts." Neressa looked at the red knot, at the oath threads, at her mother's severed wings, at Azrien's hidden scar. Then she understood the shape of the trap. "They did not only steal the throne," she whispered. "They made servants carry the weight of keeping it stolen." Her mother's eyes filled with pride and sorrow. "Yes." Vaelric lifted one hand. The oath mark on Neressa's wrist burned open, and every red thread in the chamber snapped toward her wings. "Then carry it," he said. The knot descended like a crown of blood. Azrien reached for her, but this time Neressa's wings moved before either of them. They wrapped around him, shielding the false king from the stolen throne's own curse. Neressa had never shielded a king before. She had carried trays for kings, scrubbed ash from their corridors, knelt when their shadows crossed the floor. She had been taught that royal blood stood above her life the way stars stood above mud. But when the blood crown descended, red and ravenous, her wings opened around Azrien before thought could become fear. The curse struck her back. Pain tore through every scale. Neressa bit down on a scream as the red knot crashed against her wings and spread across them in burning threads. The force drove her to one knee. Azrien caught her by the waist from behind, one arm bracing her before she could fall fully. His touch was hot through the torn servant dress, but careful, restrained even in panic. Neressa. Her name in his mouth sounded less like command than warning. "I'm still standing," she forced out. "Barely." "Then stop noticing." The words came sharp because pain needed somewhere to go. A faint, Impossible breath of laughter escaped him. Not joy, not amusement, survival. Vaelric's expression tightened. He had expected her to shield herself, expected Azrien to burn the knot, expected the chamber to punish servants above, heir below, and false king between. He had not expected the servant girl with new wings to protect the man whose family had stolen her throne. That made him angrier than hatred would have. How touching, Vaelric said. The erased heir defends the stolen crown. Neressa lifted her head. No. The red threads dug deeper. She gasped, but held his gaze. I am defending the servants. Your crown is bleeding. Vaelric's smile faltered. Only slightly. Enough for her mother to see. Leora of the scale-wing blood leaned against her chains, ash-thin and trembling. Good. The word was barely breath, but it steadied Neressa more than Azrien's arm or the wings themselves. The oath knot pulsed again. Above them, cries poured down the stairwell. The servant's pain. The net tightening. Red light ran along the chamber walls in hundreds of lines, each one tethered to a wrist, a command, a debt, a life renamed property. Azrien's grip tightened once at Neressa's waist, then released as soon as he realized. Tell me how to cut it, he said to Leora. Vaelric laughed. Still asking queens for permission? Azrien did not look at him. I am asking the woman your house chained beneath my throne. The chamber shifted. Not stone. Memory. For a breath, the red knot dimmed, and the walls showed images carved in light, black-winged rulers standing before the empty scale throne, House Kael soldiers kneeling first, then rising with blades, a child Azrien screaming as Vaelric pressed a hot crown knife into his forehead. Leora's wings cut and nailed to the throne's underside, servant oaths carved across generations to keep scale-wing blood from rising unnoticed. Neressa saw her life become part of a much older wound. She had thought herself small because the palace had made every day small. Laundry steam, ash buckets, cold bread, lowered eyes. But the cage had been built around her before she was born. Her mother met her gaze through the memory light. The knot cannot be cut by crown fire, Leora said. It feeds on rule. Every command makes it stronger. Azrien's jaw tightened. A king whose power was command had been brought to a curse that punished command. Neressa almost admired the cruelty of it. Vaelric spread his hands. You see, House Kael was not careless. We built a throne that could survive guilt. No, Neressa said, her wings trembling under the red threads. You built servants into the walls and called it survival, the chamber answered. A black scale fell from the empty scale light around her wings and struck the floor. Where it landed, one red thread turned gold. A servant's scream above became a gasp. Neressa felt the release. Only one, but real. Vaelric saw it. His eyes narrowed. Do not. Neressa looked at the scale, then at Hair Wings, then at the hundreds of red threads feeding the knot. Understanding came slowly, terribly. The throne had not given her wings to fly. Not first. It had given her wings because every scale was a name. Every scale could release one oath. Her mother's face twisted with grief. Neressa, how many? Neressa whispered. Leora did not answer. She did not need to. Neressa's wings were vast, but not endless. Azrien understood at the same moment. His face changed. No. She almost smiled at the echo from other kings in other halls. Men saying no to sacrifice after letting women become it for centuries. But Azrien's no held. No ownership. Only horror. Neressa reached over her shoulder and touched the base of one wing. If I shed them, you may not survive it, Leora said. Vaelric lifted his chin. And if she does not, every oath bleeds upward until the servants die. Choose quickly. Little heir. Azrien turned on him so violently the oath guard stepped back. Neressa caught his wrist before he could move. Commands feed it, she reminded him. His breathing was harsh. I know. Then do not command me. He looked at her. The scar beneath his crown burned gold, echoing the veins in her wings. She expected him to argue, to forbid, to promise another way he did not have. Instead, he lowered his voice. What do you choose? The question opened something in her chest. No one had ever asked her that before pain. Neressa looked at the red knot descending again, at the threads bleeding servants above, at Vaelric waiting for her to break, at her mother chained in the dark for 70 years, and at the stolen king who had stepped beside her instead of in front. Then she reached to her wing and pulled one black scale free. Pain flashed white. A red thread snapped gold. Above them, one servant cried out in relief. Neressa breathed through the agony. One, she said. Vaelric's face hardened. Azrien's eyes filled with helpless fury. Neressa looked up at the hundreds of threads. Then she pulled the second scale. The second scale came free with a sound like glass tearing from bone. Neressa nearly fell. Azrien caught her again, but this time he said nothing. No command, no demand to stop, only his hand at her waist, steady and shaking, as if holding her up. The scale struck the floor. Another red thread, turned gold. Far above, a servant's scream ended in a sob. Neressa felt the release pass through her own wrist like cool water over a burn. Someone was free. Someone who had lived every day waiting for a command to hurt less had suddenly found air. That made her pull the third scale. Pain opened behind her eyes. Her wings were not decorations. They were living memory. Each scale had roots. Each one carried heat, blood, and something that felt like a name being torn from a closed book. By the 5th, her knees had gone numb. By the 9th, blood had begun to run down her back beneath the black scales. By the 12th, the chamber blurred. But above them, the screams were changing. One by one, they became gasps, then weeping, then silence. Not the silence of fear. The silence after chains fall, and the body does not yet know how to move. Vaelric watched with growing fury. You waste a throne's inheritance on kitchen hands and stable filth. Neressa pulled another scale. A thick red thread snapped gold. The old seamstress with crooked fingers. Neressa felt her without knowing how. Felt 70 years of needlework, bent spine, burned meals, hidden kindness. Then the thread vanished, and with it, the command carved into the woman's wrist. Not waste. Neressa whispered, Return. Leora's chained face softened through tears. Azrien looked at Neressa, as if that single word had rearranged the meaning of royalty. Vaelric lifted both hands. The red knot flared brighter, dragging dozens of threads downward at once. The servants above cried out again. Neressa staggered beneath the sudden weight. You cannot free them all, he said. That is the lesson your mother never learned. Leora strained against her chains. Do not listen. Vaelric's eyes glittered. No, let her listen. Let the heir learn arithmetic. A wing has only so many scales. A kingdom has too many debts. Save a few, and the rest will curse you. Save many, and your body fails. Rule is choosing who suffers. Neressa hated him for making cruelty sound wise. Worse, she hated that pain made his words harder to dismiss. There were so many threads, hundreds, maybe more beyond the hall. Servants in kitchens, hatcheries, stables, towers, laundries, mines beneath the palace. Her wings trembled, already ragged where she had torn scales free. Azrien stepped close enough that his breath touched her hair. Do not answer him quickly, he said. She turned her head slightly. What? He wants your pain to make the choice smaller. Neressa stared at him. The red knot pulsed. Vaelric's expression darkened. Azrien kept his voice low, each word controlled. A command feeds it. A sacrifice feeds his story. There may be another way if we stop letting him decide the shape of the choice. Neressa's heart beat once. Hard. Another way. She looked at the golden threads she had freed. They no longer fed the knot. They lay across the floor like loose strands of dawn. Not dead. Waiting. Can freed oaths bind backward? She asked Leora. Her mother's eyes sharpened. Vaelric's head snapped toward her. That was answer enough. Neressa smiled through blood and agony. The expression frightened him. Leora leaned forward as far as her chains allowed. If freely given. Azrien understood first. He looked toward the staircase, toward the hall above where servants were still bleeding, kneeling, waiting to learn whether freedom would be granted to them like charity or chosen by them like breath. How do they give it? He asked. Leora's voice rasped. They must refuse the name the oath gave them. Vaelric snarled. They cannot hear you. Neressa looked at the gold threads on the floor. Every scale had carried a name. Every freed thread had touched her, briefly, like a hand. Perhaps the connection went both ways. She pressed both palms to the chamber floor, wings shuddering open behind her. Pain shot up her spine. Azrien dropped beside her. Neressa. She looked at him. Help me speak to them. For a heartbeat he froze. Then the Dragon King removed his crown. The chamber stilled. The scar beneath it burned bright gold, shaped like a broken wing. Azrien set the crown on the floor between them, no longer hiding the wound that proved his own cage. He placed one hand on the crown and one hand over Neressa's bloodied fingers, not commanding, witnessing. His voice moved through the golden threads. Servants of Draventhorn, he said, and the title sounded bitter in his mouth. No, that is the first lie. People of Draventhorn, hear me. Above, the black hall fell quiet. Even the red knot hesitated. Azrien's voice deepened. Your oaths were carved to make you property. Your pain was used to hold a stolen throne. I cannot free you by command, because command is the knife that made this curse. Neressa felt the golden threads brighten. Azrien looked at her, and she gave the smallest nod. He continued, So I ask. Refuse the name that made you owned. Not for me. Not for the crown. For yourselves. For several terrible breaths, nothing happened. Vaelric began to smile. Then, from far above, an old woman's voice shook through the open stair. I am not property. A gold flare lit the chamber. Another voice followed. Younger. I am not debt. Then another. I am not kitchen ash. I am not stable blood. I am not crown property. I am not silence. One by one, red threads turned gold without Neressa tearing another scale. Vaelric shouted and thrust his hand into the knot, trying to tighten it, but the gold spread faster. The freed threads rose from the floor and wrapped around the red knot from the outside. Not as a cage. As hands, the knot began to unravel. Neressa laughed once, breathless and broken. Then Vaelric lunged for hair. Azrien moved to strike him, but stopped himself with visible effort. No command, no crown fire. Neressa's mother smiled. Good, Leora whispered. Now let the throne judge its thief. The gold threads snapped tight around Vaelric's wrists. For the first time, Lord Vaelric screamed. Lord Vaelric screamed as the golden oath threads wrapped around his wrists. Not because they burned him, because they obeyed someone else. For most of his life, Vaelric had stood beside crowns and called it service. He had written laws, carved oaths, buried heirs, advised kings, and taught the court to mistake obedience for order. Every servant's pain had passed through his office. Every oath mark had answered to his seal. Every red thread in the chamber had once bent toward his hand. Now the freed threads held him still. Neressa watched him struggle, blood running down her back from the missing scales. Her wings trembled, ragged but open. She had never imagined Lord Vaelric could look small, not weak, not defeated. Small, as if the grand shape of him had been made from other people kneeling. The red knot above the pit unraveled strand by strand. Azrien stood beside Neressa with his crown on the floor between them, the broken wing scar on his forehead burning openly. Without the circlet, he looked younger, not less dangerous, more exposed. Like a blade stripped of its sheath and forced to admit it had been sharpened by someone else's hand, Leora lifted her chained head. "Empty scale throne," she whispered, voice cracking with old power. "Your heir has knelt. Your servants have refused the false name. Your stolen king has laid down the crown. Judge the thief." The chamber answered. The black pit beneath the red knot filled with light. Not gold, white. A cold, ancient dragon fire that did not warm the skin. It rose in a thin column around Vaelric, illuminating every line on his face, every hidden mark beneath his robes, every drop of smoke bleeding from the broken ruby at his throat. Vaelric stopped screaming. His eyes went flat with terror. "No," he said. "This court has no authority over me." The old voice beneath the throne replied through every scale on Neressa's wings. Authority was the first theft. The white fire flashed. The chamber vanished. In its place appeared the black hall 70 years before. Neressa saw it not as memory whispered through ash, but as a living scene around them. The empty scale throne stood whole and winged then. Its back opened into two vast black arches. Leora was young, crowned in scale fire, standing before it with living wings spread behind her. The nobles of House Kael knelt before her. Then they rose with blades. Vaelric stood among them, younger, beautiful in a cruel way, a council chain bright on his chest. Beside him was a man with Azrien's eyes, his grandfather, perhaps holding a crown that did not yet belong to him. "This kingdom cannot be ruled by a bloodline that answers the throne before it answers law," young Vaelric said. Leora's younger self raised her hand. "The throne is older than your law." "And that," Vaelric answered, "is why it must be emptied." The vision shifted. Battle, fire, wings torn, names burned from scale, children carried into servant quarters, mothers forced to sign debt scrolls with bloody fingerprints. The scale wing line was not simply murdered. It was lowered, renamed, scattered into kitchens, laundries, stables, and ash rooms, hidden beneath oaths so their blood would punish itself if it ever rose. Neressa could not breathe. This was why her mother had been called laundry servant, not because she had fallen, because they had buried a queen low enough that no one would look. The vision darkened. A nursery appeared. A small boy cried beneath a canopy of red silk. Azrien, no older than 5. Vaelric stood over him with a crown knife glowing black at the edge. The child tried to turn away. A woman's voice begged from somewhere unseen. "He is only a boy." Vaelric did not look back. "Then he will heal around the lie." He pressed the blade beneath the child's crown line. Azrien beside Neressa went utterly still. In the vision, young Azrien screamed as the broken wing scar was carved into his skin. The mark flared gold, then red, then disappeared beneath the first royal circlet placed on his head. Vaelric's voice softened as he spoke to the child. "You will feel pain when the true heir rises. You will feel fear and call it instinct. You will guard the stolen throne because you believe losing it means losing yourself." The vision shattered. Azrien staggered back. Neressa caught his wrist. His pulse was wild beneath her fingers. For once, he did not hide it. Vaelric looked at him from inside the white fire, breathing hard. "You were meant to survive." Azrien's voice came rough. "I was meant to obey." "You were meant to rule." "No." Azrien looked at the crown on the floor. "I was trained to keep a wound covered." Neressa felt the words through her own chest. The stolen king, the hidden heir. 2 cages, 1 crown. Vaelric's fear turned, slowly, into rage. "You ungrateful child. Do you think truth will save you? Truth will tear this kingdom apart. Nobles will choose sides. Servants will demand names. Houses will bleed. I kept Draventhorn standing. Leora laughed once, dry as bone. You kept it kneeling. The golden threads tightened around Vaelric. His wrists began to smoke. The white fire did not burn flesh first. It burned ownership. Rings blackened on his fingers. Seals cracked beneath his skin. The broken ruby at his throat split wider, revealing a tiny black scale sealed inside. Neressa's wings flared. Her mother gasped. My crown scale. Vaelric smiled through pain. There it was. The last secret. The empty scale throne had remained empty not only because the rightful bloodline was hidden, but because Vaelric had stolen the scale that completed its memory. He closed his fist around the ruby shards. If I cannot hold the throne, no heir will. The black crown scale inside the ruby dissolved into smoke. Leora screamed. The empty scale throne above them roared through stone. Neressa's wings convulsed. Every scale on them turned cold. The gold oath threads flickered, and above, the servants cried out as the freed marks threatened to close again. Azrien moved. Not with crown fire, with choice. He grabbed the crown from the floor and threw it into the white fire around Vaelric. The royal circlet melted instantly, its false gold unraveling into molten lines. The broken wing scar on Azrien's forehead blazed so bright, Neressa had to shield her eyes. The smoke from the stolen crown scale twisted toward the melting crown, then toward Neressa. Azrien reached for her hand. Call it. I don't know its name. Yes, you do, Leora rasped. It was hidden under yours. Neressa closed her eyes. The name the reliquary had whispered returned not Neressa, not servant, not debt. A name older than the palace. Vaelira, she whispered. The smoke stopped. The black crown scale flew into her chest like an arrow. Neressa's wings snapped wide. And far above, in the black hall, the empty scale throne grew its missing wings. The name struck Neressa like a bell rung inside her bones. Vaelira. It was not a sound she had learned. It was a memory older than language, older than servant oaths, older than the palace that had taught her to answer only when summoned. The moment the crown scale entered her chest, her wings stopped feeling like something attached to her body and became something that had been waiting for her body to remember them. Above, the black hall thundered. Stone cracked. Nobles screamed. The empty scale throne, wingless for 70 years, unfolded 2 vast black arches from its back. Not carved wings, living ones. Each scale along them opened like an eye of molten gold, and every hidden name burned across the throne's surface at once. Names of the erased. Names of queens called traitors. Children renamed servants. Bloodlines buried in laundry rooms and ash pits. The hall could not look away. In the chamber below, Lord Vaelric staggered inside the white dragon fire. The gold threads bound his wrists, but the smoke from his destroyed ruby still clawed toward Neressa, as if trying to tear the crown scale back out of her heart. Azrien placed himself between them, not as king, as shield. Vaelric laughed, hoarse and furious. Still protecting what will unmake you. Azrien's face was pale beneath the blood-bright scar on his forehead. The crown was gone now, melted in the judging fire. Without it, he looked less like the false king Vaelric had shaped, and more like a man standing at the edge of his own undoing. If truth unmakes me, he said, then I was never whole. Neressa heard the pain under the words. She wanted to hate him for his house, for his name, for the throne stolen before either of them was born. But hatred required him to cling to the lie. He was not clinging. That made everything harder. Leora strained against her chains. Daughter. The word nearly broke Neressa. Not heir. Not weapon. Not queen. Daughter. Neressa turned to her mother. The white light from the pit made Leora's severed wing stumps look even more brutal. 70 years chained beneath a throne that belonged to her blood, kept alive not as mercy but as anger. How do I free you? Neressa asked. Vaelric smiled. Leora closed her eyes. That silence answered before words did. "No," Neressa whispered. "The throne remembers through what remains," Leora said gently. "My wings were taken. My name was buried. My blood was hidden in you. I was kept alive to keep the theft alive. If I leave this chair before the oath knot is remade, every freed servant mark may collapse back into pain." Azrien looked at the chains around her. There must be another way. Leora's gaze softened toward him. "That is the first royal sentence worth hearing in this chamber." Vaelric spat blood. "Sentiment. This is why Scalewing rule failed. You cannot build kingdoms on pity." Neressa turned on him. "No. You built one on fear, and had to carve oaths into children to keep it standing." The gold threads tightened. Vaelric winced, but his eyes remained cruel. "And what will you build, little servant queen? A throne that asks? A crown that apologizes? Nobles will tear you apart before sunrise." The old Neressa would have believed him. The old Neressa had measured power by how loudly it could punish. But above them, servants were refusing their oaths. The throne had grown wings. Azrien had melted his crown. Her mother still breathed. The impossible had become a place to stand. Neressa looked at the oath knot. It was no longer fully red. Gold spread through it in widening veins. But at the center remained a hard, black core, the first command, the root spell, the lie that had renamed the Scalewing bloodline as debt. She stepped toward it. Azrien caught her wrist, then released immediately, as if the old habits of grabbing and stopping had burned him. "What will it cost?" he asked. Neressa looked at her ragged wings. Fewer scales than before. Blood where some had been torn free. Gold light where others still held names. "Maybe nothing," she said. He did not believe her. Neither did she. But she was tired of letting men like Vaelric make every choice sound like sacrifice. Neressa opened her wings toward the knot, not tearing scales now. Offering them. "People of Draventhorn," she said, voice carrying up the stairs through the gold threads, into the black hall above. "If your oath hurt you, name what it stole." For a moment, the chamber waited. Then voices answered from above. "My hands, my daughter, my years, my name, my sleep, my right to say no." Each answer became a gold flame inside the knot. The black core shook. Vaelric screamed, "Stop speaking." No one did. The voices multiplied. Servants, guards, even low-born scribes and hatchery workers. The oath had stolen differently from each of them, but the root was the same. Ownership disguised as law. Azrien stepped beside Neressa. His voice rose with hers. "And if my crown profited from that theft, name it too." The hall above went silent. Neressa looked at him. This was not a king offering pity. This was a man inviting judgment onto his own bloodline. One voice answered, "The crown took my brother." Another followed, "The crown took my mother's wage. The crown took my child. The crown took our names." Azrien closed his eyes as each accusation landed. He did not defend himself. He listened. The broken wing scar on his forehead changed. Its jagged red edges turned gold. Not healed, but honest. The black core of the oath knot cracked. Leora smiled through tears. "That is how a throne is remade," she whispered. Vaelric lunged one final time, dragging the gold threads with him, reaching not for Neressa, but for the chain holding Leora to the iron chair. "If I die judged," he snarled, "the old queen dies forgotten." Azrien moved, but Neressa was faster. Her wings snapped forward, not to shield this time, but to strike. A single black scale flew from the tip of her right wing and buried itself in Vaelric's palm. He froze. The empty scale throne above roared. The scale drank the last stolen command from his blood. Vaelric's body arched in the white fire as every oath he had ever carved returned to him, not as wounds on others, as memory inside himself. He saw every child, every servant, every erased heir. Every queen whose wings he had ordered cut. His scream became soundless. Then the gold threads released him. Lord Vaelric fell to his knees before Neressa, not because he chose to, because, for the first time in his life, no stolen power remained to hold him upright. The oath knot split open. Red light vanished. Gold fire rushed upward through the stairs into the black hall. Above them, every servant mark in Draventhorn broke at once, and Leora's chains turned to ash. The sound that rose from the black hall was not a cheer. It was too broken for that. It was the sound of hundreds of people feeling pain leave their bodies and not knowing what to do with the space it left behind. Servant oaths cracked across wrists like thin red glass. In kitchens, in stables, in tower corridors, in the hatchery and the ash rooms, marks that had burned for generations split open and faded into gold dust. Some servants collapsed. Some stared at their own hands as if seeing them for the first time. Some wept without sound. Others whispered the same word again and again, testing whether the world would punish them for saying it. Free. Beneath the throne, Neressa felt every broken oath pass through her wings. Not as pain this time, as release. The ragged places where she had torn scales from her own body still burned. But the fire had changed. It no longer felt like loss. It felt like empty soil after roots had been pulled free. Leora's chains turned to ash around the iron chair. For a moment, her mother did not move. Then she leaned forward, and Neressa saw the cost of 70 stolen years. Leora had survived as an anchor for the oath knot, but survival was not life. Her body was thin, her hands trembled, and the stumps of her wings bled old gold light where the chains had cut too deep. Neressa crossed the chamber and fell to her knees before her. Not as servant, not as heir. As daughter, Leora touched her face, with shaking fingers. They told me you died. Neressa swallowed hard. They told me you were dead. A terrible tenderness passed between them. Then Leora smiled, and for one breath, the ruined chamber became smaller than a mother's hand against her child's cheek. Azrien stood several steps away, crownless, silent, and visibly uncertain where a false king should stand, when the rightful bloodline held its dead queen alive in the dark. That uncertainty mattered. Neressa saw him choose not to fill the room with himself. Lord Vaelric remained on his knees inside the dying white fire. The gold threads had released his wrists, but judgment had not finished with him. His face looked older now, his elegant bones sharpened by terror. He stared at his own palms as if expecting servant marks to appear there. Perhaps, in memory, they already had. Leora's gaze shifted to him. The chamber grew cold. You will not die here, she said. Vaelric laughed weakly. Mercy from the wingless queen? No, Leora answered. Witness. The word struck him harder than punishment. Neressa understood. Death would make him legend or martyr, depending on who told the story. Witness would make him smaller, forced to hear names, forced to remember hands, forced to watch the people he called property stand upright. Azrien stepped forward. He will answer publicly. Vaelric looked up with a flash of old venom. To whose court? Yours? Hers? The servants? You have freed chaos and named it justice. The old voice of the throne whispered through the chamber. Justice begins where ownership ends. Above them, the black hall thundered again. Not with screams this time, with the unfolding of wings. Neressa looked up. The empty scale throne was calling. Leora's hand tightened around hers. You must go. No. The word came from Neressa before she could soften it. Her mother's eyes filled with understanding. I just found you, Neressa whispered, and I have waited long enough to see you stand where they said you never would. Leora drew a painful breath, but the throne has remembered. If no one answers it now, every house in Draventhorn will try to claim the story before you reach the stairs. Azrien's face darkened. She was right. Already, nobles above would be rearranging loyalty into survival. Some would kneel. Some would plot. Some would whisper that Neressa had used servant magic to steal the throne. Others would demand Azrien crush her before the freed servants became a new power the old houses could not control. The public reversal had happened. Now came the danger after truth. Neressa stood slowly, her wings dragged behind her, torn but luminous. Azrien moved beside her. "I will walk with you." Leora looked at him, measuring. "As king?" Azrien did not answer at once. Then he looked at the melted remains of his crown, cooling in the white fire. "No," he said. "As the man who helped keep a stolen throne standing, even before I knew its name." Neressa studied him. It was not enough, but it was not nothing. Together, they climbed the stairs. When they emerged into the black hall, the court fell into a silence so complete Neressa could hear gold dust falling from broken oath marks. The empty scale throne stood behind the dais, with its living wings fully spread. Vast black arcs veined with molten fire. Every hidden name blazed across it. The banner of House Kael had fallen to the floor, torn down the middle. Servants stood among nobles now, no longer pushed to the shadows, staring at their bare wrists. Neressa stepped into the hall, her torn wings lifted despite the pain. A murmur spread. Scale, wing, queen's blood. The erased heir. Lord Vaelric's remaining allies began to retreat toward the side arches. Azrien saw them. So did Neressa. But the throne moved first. A single black scale detached from its living wing and floated down before the court. It turned in the air, molten letters forming across its surface. House Kael, crowned by conquest. A second scale fell. House Vael, blood by throne. The nobles erupted. "No, forgery, old magic lies." Azrien stepped forward. Every eye turned to him. He had no crown now. The scar beneath it burned openly. His armor was still royal, but without the circlet he looked less like the answer and more like the question Draventhorn had avoided for 70 years. He lifted both hands, not to command, to show they were empty. "The throne has spoken truth," he said. The hall shook with outrage. Neressa looked at him sharply. Azrien's voice carried over them. House Kael took what was not given. Lord Vaelric hid the crime, carved oaths into servants, chained Queen Leora beneath this hall, and marked me as a child to guard a lie. I will not ask Draventhorn to pretend this throne is mine by right. A noble lord shouted. "Then step down," another cried. "If she rules, every noble house will burn." Servants stiffened. Guards gripped weapons. The hall leaned toward civil war. The empty scale throne's wings flared. Neressa felt its pull. "Sit. Claim. Rise." The command was not cruel, but it was still a command. She looked at the throne. Her blood had waited 70 years to touch. Then she looked at the freed servants, at her mother being helped up the stairs below, at Azrien standing crownless before a court that might devour him for speaking truth. Neressa walked toward the throne. Every breath in the hall stopped. She climbed the dais, turned, and faced them all. Then she did not sit. "I was dragged here to prove my blood was worthless," she said. "Do not ask me to prove its worth by becoming the same kind of throne." The living wings behind the empty scale throne stilled. Neressa's own wings opened wider, gold light spilling from every torn place. "If Draventhorn wants a ruler," she said, "it will first answer the people it chained." And from the back of the hall, one freed servant knelt not to the throne, but to Neressa, then another, then 10, then 100. Not commanded. Chosen. The kneeling began like rain touching dry stone. One servant lowered herself first, an old woman with cracked hands and gold dust still clinging to the place where her oath mark had broken. Then a stable boy followed. Then a hatchery maid. Then the kitchen twins. Then guards whose wrists bore the same fading scars beneath their gauntlets. They did not kneel the way the court had taught them to kneel. Not with heads bowed in fear. Not with backs bent to survive. They knelt as witnesses. Neressa stood before the empty scale throne with her torn wings open, and every chosen knee on the black floor struck the noble houses harder than a battle horn. Lord Vaelric of the Western Cliffs drew his sword. "If the servants choose rulers now," he spat, "then Draventhorn has already fallen." 3 other nobles reached for blades. Azrien moved 1 step forward. The black hall tensed, waiting for crown fire, command, punishment, waiting for the old shape of power to return because even those who hated it understood it. But Azrien did not draw his sword. He did not raise his hand. He looked at the nobles with the scar beneath his missing crown burning gold and said, "No one here is choosing a ruler for you. They are choosing to stand unowned." Vaelric laughed. "They are kneeling." Neressa answered before Azrien could. "Yes," she said. "And for the first time, it is not because your houses made them." That landed. Not loudly, deeply. The servants remained still, but the air around them changed. People who had spent lifetimes made small by command now realized their posture could mean something else. The throne's living wings stirred behind Neressa, and the names across its scales burned brighter. A noblewoman near the eastern arch pointed at Neressa's wings. "She carries old blood. Old blood wants revenge." Neressa looked down at her own hands. There was blood beneath her nails, but most of it was hers. Her back throbbed where scales had been torn free. Her mother was still being helped up the lower stairs, too weak to stand without support. Azrien's crown lay melted below the throne. Servants wept over freed wrists. If revenge wanted to enter this hall, there were 100 doors it could use. She lifted her head. "I want names returned," she said. "I want oaths broken. I want every debt used to bind a child burned in public record. If you call that revenge, it says more about what you fear losing than what I plan to take." Some nobles paled, because they heard it. Not bloodlust. Accounting. The kind kingdoms feared more than fire. Lord Vaelric raised his sword higher. Pretty words from a girl who just grew wings from a dead throne. The empty scale throne rumbled. Neressa felt it behind her like a living storm. It wanted to answer insult with judgment. It wanted to peel lies from noble blood and display them across the hall. It wanted 70 years of silence paid back in one terrible breath. So did part of her. That frightened her most. Azrien looked at her, not the nobles. Neressa, only her name. A reminder, not a restraint. She inhaled. The throne quieted. Lord Vaelric was dragged into the hall by gold-threaded guards, his wrists bound not with iron but with the freed oath threads he had once controlled. When the court saw him forced to walk behind Leora of the Scalewing Blood, a wave of horror passed through the noble balconies. Leora entered slowly, supported by 2 former servants who no longer wore red marks at their wrists. Her severed wing stumps glowed faintly beneath the dark cloth wrapped around her shoulders. She looked ruined and royal at once. Vaelric looked at the kneeling servants and smiled through blood. "This is how it begins," he said. "They kneel to her today. Tomorrow, they hang your sons from the balconies." A murmur of fear spread. Neressa's jaw tightened. Even bound, Vaelric knew where to press. He did not need power if fear would speak for him. Azrien turned toward the court. "He used that same fear to chain your servants, your king, and your history." Vaelric tilted his head. "And yet, I did not invent noble fear, did I? I only gave it tools." That was the dangerous truth. The black hall held too many guilty faces. Neressa stepped down from the dais. Her wings dragged behind her, each movement painful, but she walked until she stood before Vaelric. The hall watched, breath locked. "You think if you make them afraid enough, they will ask for chains again," she said. Vaelric smiled. "They always do." Neressa looked past him to the noble houses. "Then let them answer first." A ripple moved through the court. A High Lord scoffed. Answer what? Neressa turned slowly, making sure every balcony could see her face. Will you keep the servant oaths broken? Silence. The question had no poetry in it. No ancient magic. No winged throne. No prophecy. That made it harder to escape. One noble lord looked away. Another whispered to his wife. A third stared at the freed servants as if seeing an army where people stood. Azrien did not speak for them. Neither did Leora. Neressa waited. At last, Lady Morel of the South River House stepped forward. She was old, narrow-eyed, and known for never wasting kindness. My house will keep them broken, she said. Not from love, from shame. One answer. Then another lord, younger, pale with fear, lowered his sword. My house also. Then the captain of the guard knelt on one knee and laid his blade flat. The guard will enforce no oath mark again. The hall began to shift. Not healed, not safe, but moving. Vaelric's smile faded. Neressa looked at him. Hear that? He said nothing. She leaned closer. That is a kingdom learning it can survive without your fear. The empty scale throne opened its living wings fully behind her. A column of molten gold light rose from the throne to the broken ceiling, and across that light appeared the old names of the scale wing bloodline, queen after queen, heir after heir, child after child. At the very end, one name burned brighter than the rest. Vaelura Neressa. The hall whispered it. Neressa felt the name settle over her like a cloak she had not asked for but could no longer deny. Azrien turned to face her. Then, before the nobles, servants, guards, and the living throne, the crownless Dragon King lowered himself to one knee, not to surrender the kingdom into chaos, not to ask forgiveness he had not yet earned, to acknowledge the bloodline his house had buried. I stand witness, he said. The black hall trembled. Neressa's wings flared gold, and the empty scale throne finally spoke in words all could hear. Then let the heir choose the shape of the crown. Then let the heir choose the shape of the crown. The words did not come from a throat. They came from the empty scale throne itself. From every living black scale, every restored name, every winged arch that had unfolded behind Neressa, like a storm finally remembering the sky. The black hall went utterly still. Neressa stood before the throne with torn wings, bloodied back, broken oath mark, and a name burning inside her chest that had once belonged to queens. Vaelira Neressa. The court whispered it, as if saying it too loudly might change the shape of the world. Perhaps it already had. Azrien remained on one knee before her. The sight struck the hall harder than any spell. The crownless Dragon King, heir of House Kael, kneeling not from defeat, not from fear, but witness. His bronze eyes stayed lifted to hers. No command hid inside them. No claim. No demand that she save his pride by accepting the old rules in prettier language. That made the choice harder. The throne called to her. Sit. Rise. Restore. The words moved through her bones, powerful and ancient, and not cruel. But Neressa had learned that even rightful power could become a cage if no one questioned what it asked. She looked at the throne, then at the servants still kneeling by choice across the hall. Then at Leora, her mother, standing with help beside the open stair, wingless and trembling but alive. Then at Vaelric, bound in gold threads, watching with a smile that had returned to his mouth. There, that smile, small, patient, poisonous. He wanted her to sit. Neressa understood him then. If she took the throne in the old way, the court would have its story by morning. Servant girl becomes queen. Old blood replaces new blood. House fights house. The freed servants become her army in noble mouths. The scale-wing name becomes threat before it can become truth. Vaelric had lost control of the lie, but he was still waiting for power to repeat itself. Neressa would not give him that mercy. She stepped past Azrien and climbed the dais. The throne's living wings spread wider, casting gold across her face. The seat waited, black and empty, untouched for 70 years. Every hidden name across its back blazed. The court held its breath. Neressa placed one hand on the left armrest. The throne warmed beneath her palm. It knew her. It wanted her. A sob rose from somewhere among the servants. Neressa closed her eyes. For one heartbeat, she imagined sitting, letting the court feel the full reversal, letting every noble who had laughed watch the servant girl take the royal seat their kings had failed to claim. It would be satisfying. It would be beautiful. It would make a powerful story. But it would not be enough. She opened her eyes and turned back to the hall. "I will not wear a crown shaped by theft," she said. Murmurs broke out at once. The throne's wings shuddered behind her. Azrien rose slowly, but did not speak. Neressa continued, voice gaining strength. House Kael took the throne by conquest. Lord Vaelric kept it through oaths, blood, debt, and buried names. But if I sit tonight because my blood is older, then the lesson remains the same. The strongest claim wins, and everyone beneath it learns new words for obedience. The servants listened. The nobles listened too, though many looked as if each sentence cost them flesh. Neressa lifted her broken wrist. The servant oaths end. Not because I command kindness, because no throne in Draventhorn will again own a living body. The empty scale throne pulsed once, gold light rushing through its wings. Not rejection, recognition. Leora began to weep silently. Vaelric's smile vanished. Neressa turned toward Azrien. House Kael must answer for what it stole. Azrien bowed his head. Yes, not with one speech, not with guilt offered in place of repair. Records opened, names restored, lands taken under false debt returned where they can be, trials held for every lord who carved oath marks into children. Yes, his answer carried through the hall, not as royal generosity, but as sentence accepted. Neressa looked toward the noble balconies. And the old houses will answer under the same law they forced on servants. Public witness. Named charge. No secret cells. No bloodline exemption. That drew sharper protest. A lord shouted, "You cannot put ancient houses under servant judgment." The throne's wings snapped outward. The lord fell silent. Neressa's voice stayed cold. "I can put criminals under law." The captain of the guard struck his fist against his chest. "The guard will uphold it." One by one, freed guards repeated the vow. Not oath. Vow. Neressa felt the difference like clean air. Then she faced the throne again. "What shape of crown?" she whispered. The living scales shifted. The black wings behind the throne folded inward, not disappearing, but changing. Scales loosened from the back, floating into the air like dark leaves. They formed not a circlet, not a blade, not a chain, but a wide ring of separate scales hovering above the dais. Each scale bore one name. Scale, wing, Kael, servant, guard, hatchery, ashroom, river house, forge quarter, old queen, freed child. A crown that could not sit on one head. The court stared. Azrien stepped beside Neressa. "A council?" Neressa looked at him. "A witness circle. No bloodline rules alone until Draventhorn learns what rule means without ownership." Vaelric snarled. "Weakness dressed as virtue." Leora's voice cut through the hall. "No. Memory dressed as law." The hovering scale ring brightened. Neressa turned to Azrien. "Will you stand in it?" He looked at the scale bearing House Kael's name, then at heir. "If you allow a stolen king to begin by answering before it." "Not king," Neressa said. His face tightened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice enough that only those nearest could hear. "Not yet." Something painful and hopeful moved through his eyes. The throne gave one final pulse. The hovering scales spread over the hall like stars brought low enough to read. And for the first time in 70 years, the empty scale throne was no longer empty because it had rejected a king. It was empty because Neressa chose not to make freedom kneel to one. Dawn did not enter the black hall gently. It broke through the ceiling, where the throne's gold fire had split the stone, pouring pale light over banners, broken oath marks, melted crown gold, and the hundreds of people who had spent the night learning that history could bleed. No one moved toward the empty scale throne. That was the first miracle. For 70 years, every noble house in Draventhorn had circled power like wolves around a wounded stag. Every law, marriage, debt, execution, and servant oath had existed to keep someone seated above someone else. Yet now the throne stood open, living wings folded behind it, and the hall waited not for a king to claim it, but for Neressa Vale to decide what would happen next. Note Vaelric alone. Not servant alone. Both. She stood on the dais with her torn wings trailing behind her, blood drying beneath the black scales. The old name burning in her chest, like a coal that would never go cold. The hovering witness circle of scales turned slowly above the hall, each separate scale carrying a name, a house, a wound, or a people once left out of rule. Azrien stood beside her, crownless. That mattered more than any speech he could have made. His scar still burned beneath the place where the crown had hidden it, shaped like a broken wing. Without the circlet, every noble could see what Vaelric had carved into him as a child. False king. Stolen guardian. Boy turned into lock. Man trying. Too late and not too late to become something else. Neressa looked at him. The first witness circle will open with confession. Azrien nodded once. Mine. A shock moved through the hall. Several nobles began to whisper, but Azrien stepped forward before their fear could become argument. He turned toward the servants first, not the high houses. House Kael took a throne that was not freely given, he said. My ancestors buried the scale wing line, renamed its survivors as debt, and allowed servant oaths to become chains beneath the law. I was marked as a child to protect that theft, but I still wore the crown that profited from it. His voice did not shake. That made the shame sharper. I will open every royal archive. I will surrender every oath record. I will stand before every claim brought by those harmed under my house's rule. Until the witness circle judges otherwise, I hold no crown by right. The hall trembled with the weight of it. Not magic. Consequence. Lord Vaelric, bound near the foot of the dais in gold thread restraints, lifted his head. His face had aged in the night, the elegance stripped to bone and fury. They will devour you for that. Azrien looked down at him. Then at least they will finally be eating truth. A murmur passed through the freed servants. Neressa felt it like wind beneath damaged wings. Leora stood near the stairs, supported by the old seamstress and the captain of the guard. Her mother looked breakable in the dawn, but her eyes were bright. When Neressa's gaze met hers, Leora did not nod toward the throne. She did not command her daughter to finish what blood had begun. She only mouthed one word. Choose. Neressa turned to the court. Lord Vaelric will not be executed today, she said. Angry voices rose at once. Servants who had bled under oath marks, guards whose families had been bound, nobles terrified of what he might still reveal. Even Azrien looked at her sharply, though he held his silence. Neressa let the anger rise. Then she lifted one torn wing. The hall quieted. Death would make him a closed door, she said. Draventhorn has lived too long behind closed doors. Vaelric will stand before the witness circle. Every oath he carved, every name he buried, every child he marked, every queen he erased will be spoken where all can hear. Let him live long enough to be unable to hide from memory. Vaelric's face changed. For the first time, he looked afraid of life. Good, Neressa thought. Then she let the thought pass. She would not build herself from his fear. The witness scales above the hall brightened. One by one, people began to speak names. Not testimony yet. Not full trials. Only names returned to air. A stablemate spoke her mother's true family name. A guard spoke the name his grandfather had been forbidden to write. The old seamstress, hands trembling, spoke the name of a scale-winged child taken from the laundry rooms 50 years before. Each name rose into the hovering scales and burned there, not as ownership, but as record. Leora spoke last. Leora Vaelric of the Scale. Wing blood, she said. Not debt, not ash, not dead. The empty scale throne bowed its living wings. Neressa's throat tightened. She stepped down from the dais and crossed to her mother. The hall watched, but for once, Neressa did not feel consumed by its eyes. She knelt before Leora, not because law required it, not because blood demanded it, but because she wanted to place her forehead against the hands that had once held her before the world named her servant. Leora bent over her and touched her hair. "My daughter," she whispered. Neressa closed her eyes. For one breath she was not heir, not symbol, not danger, only found. When she rose, Azrien was waiting a few steps away. Careful, silent, letting the moment belong to her before he entered it. That restraint nearly undid her. She walked to him. The hall sharpened with attention. Nobles loved turning every glance into alliance, every touch into claim. Neressa knew what they wanted from this moment. A promise, a marriage, a political seal, a clean ending to a dirty history. She would not give them one. Azrien seemed to know. "You owe me nothing," he said before she could speak. "No," she answered. A faint pain crossed his face, but he did not look away. She stepped closer. "But I believe you owe the truth more than guilt. I do, and I believe Draventhorn may need you in the circle, not above it." His bronze eyes searched hers. "And you?" Neressa looked toward the throne, then at her torn wings. "I need to learn how to carry what woke in me before anyone asks me to carry a kingdom." Azrien's voice softened. "Then I will wait outside the shape of your choice." It was not a vow of possession, not a claim. That was why it reached her. Neressa lifted her hand, then hesitated. She had spent a lifetime being grabbed, dragged, bound, and positioned. Touch still felt like a language she was only beginning to own. Azrien waited. So she chose. She placed her hand over the scar beneath his crown line. The hall inhaled. Gold light moved from his broken wing scar into her palm, then through the veins of her wings, not binding them, not crowning them, only acknowledging that both had been marked by the same lie and had chosen not to keep serving it. Azrien closed his eyes once, as if the touch hurt and healed in the same breath. When he opened them, he took her hand and lowered his head over it, not kissing her palm like a king rewarding a heroine, not kneeling to turn her into a spectacle. He simply pressed his brow to her fingers, where she touched the scar. "I stand witness to Neressa Vale," he said quietly. "Vaelric, by blood, free by choice." The words moved through her more deeply than the throne's command had. The empty scale throne answered with a low hum. The hovering witness circle settled into place above the hall, each scale taking its own position, no single one higher than all the rest. The old throne remained empty below it. Not dead, not rejected, but transformed from seat into memory. Outside, bells began to ring across Draventhorn. Not alarm. Not coronation. Release. People in the palace courtyards looked up as red dust fell from their wrists. Servants stepped through doors. They had once needed permission to cross. Guards removed oath registers from the walls and carried them into the open. In the hatchery, old dragon eggs warmed beneath dawnlight for the first time in years. Neressa turned toward the broken ceiling. Her wings hurt. They would hurt for a long time. But when the dawn wind entered the hall, the torn edges lifted. Not fully. Enough. Leora smiled through tears. Azrien stood beside Neressa, not as king above her, not as enemy beneath her, but as a man who had laid down a stolen crown and remained to answer for its weight. Neressa looked at the people of Draventhorn nobles, servants, guards, oath-carvers, survivors, liars, witnesses, and understood that freedom would not be clean by sunrise. Truth would not make them gentle overnight. Repair would take years. Some would resist. Some would betray. Some would wish for the old chains because chains had made the world simple. But the throne was empty by choice now, and that changed everything. The smallest freed servant, a boy no older than 7, stepped forward with his bare wrist held high. "What do we call you?" he asked. The hall waited. "Queen, heir, servant, Vaelric." Neressa looked at him and smiled, tired and real. "For now," she said, "call me Neressa." The boy nodded as if that were answer enough. Above her, the living wings of the empty scale throne folded around the witness circle like shelter, not cage. And when Neressa's own wings opened into the dawn, no one in the black hall mistook kneeling for ownership again.